Welcome to Deep Dive into Knowledge.
Can animals reason? Intelligence across the animal kingdom.
Deep dive into knowledge. There is a very particular, very quiet experience that I think most of us have had, perhaps without ever fully registering what it actually means. You might be, say, standing at your kitchen window early in the morning, you're holding a warm cup of coffee, and you're just looking out into a still garden.
Right.
And a bird, perhaps a crow, or just a simple garden, thrush lands on the wooden fence. Or maybe you're sitting in your living room late at night and your dog or cat is resting across from you.
Yeah.
Completely still, just with their eyes locked onto yours. And in those solitary moments, there is this strangely comforting assumption that sort of settles over us. We look at these creatures and we unconsciously assume that they are simply running on autopilot.
Yeah.
We imagine them as these beautiful, perfectly calibrated biological machines, driven entirely by invisible programming, ancient rhythms, and just immediate physical needs. Hunger, fear, sleep. We take comfort in the idea that the natural world is this place of profound silence, really. A space completely absent of the noisy, chaotic churning of thought that defines the human experience.
Right, it feels neat.
Exactly, it feels neat, it feels ordered. But then occasionally, something happens that fractures that illusion entirely.
Yeah.
The bird on the fence does not just peck blindly at a seed. It stops, it tilts its head, it shifts its weight, leans forward, and seems to study its surroundings with this undeniable, piercing intention. Your pet does not just react to a sound. It looks at a closed door, looks back at you, and seems to actually calculate a strategy to get what it wants. And in that fraction of a second, the comforting illusion of the biological machine simply vanishes.
It does.
And it leaves behind this subtle, quiet wonder and an unresolved paradox that is genuinely difficult to sit with. What if the ordinary silent world of the creatures around us actually hides a vast invisible architecture of thought? What if, when we look into the dark, unblinking eyes of an animal, we are not looking at a creature merely surviving its environment, but at a mind making quiet, deliberate calculations?
Yes.
What if there is an entire universe of reasoning happening right beside us, entirely unnoticed? It makes you wonder about the very mechanics of their existence. When the autopilot fails, when the ancient rhythms are not enough, what takes over? So tell me, what actually happens in the mind of an animal when it encounters a completely new, unfamiliar problem in the wild?
Well, to understand what happens in that mind, we have to look closely at a scenario where instinct simply cannot help.
Okay.
Imagine the exact crow you just mentioned, sitting on a fence. But in front of this crow is a narrow, transparent plastic tube. And stuck deep inside that tube is a piece of food.
Right.
Now, this is a completely novel problem. The crow has never seen a plastic tube before. Its ancestors never encountered one.
No, of course not.
So there is no biological programming, no evolutionary autopilot that tells a bird how to extract food from a smooth, artificial cylinder.
So what does instinct tell it to do?
Most animals, relying purely on instinct, would simply try to reach it with their beak, fail, and fly away to find an easier meal. Instinct tells an animal to conserve energy.
Just give up and move on.
Precisely. But this crow does not fly away. It stays. It studies the tube from multiple angles. It peers down the top. It looks through the side. Then it flies down and selects a small stick.
Okay.
It drops the stick into the hole. But the stick is too straight. It merely pushes the food further down.
Oh, making it worse.
Yes. And the crow registers this failure. It discards the straight stick. It searches and selects another. And when that fails, the crow does something truly extraordinary.
What does it do?
It takes a straight piece of wire or a firm twig, wedges it into a crevice in the fence, and uses its beak to physically bend the material into a distinct hook shape.
Wait, really? It makes a hook?
It does. It then takes this newly manufactured tool, inserts the hooked end into the tube, catches the food, and retrieves it.
That is astonishing.
It is the precise moment instinct ends and reasoning begins. Reasoning is the ability to solve a novel problem without prior teaching or observation.
Right, because nobody showed it how to do that.
Exactly. Nobody showed this crow how to bend a hook. It did not watch its mother do it. It assessed an unfamiliar obstacle, imagined a physical solution that did not yet exist, and manipulated its environment to create that solution.
I mean, let me play devil's advocate for a moment, because that is an incredible image. But could a skeptic not simply argue that this is just operant conditioning?
Right, the trial and error argument.
Yes, because we know animals learn by accidentally doing something, getting a reward, and then repeating it. If the crow accidentally bent a twig once and got food, is it not just mindlessly repeating a reinforced physical behavior? How do scientists separate actual deliberate imagination from just a really advanced parlor trick?
That is exactly the question researchers must ask to maintain scientific rigor. The distinction lies in the concept of novelty and the complete absence of trial and error in the final execution.
Okay, unpack that for me.
In operant conditioning, as you described, the animal thrashes about or tries random actions until one accidentally works. And over hundreds of iterations, it refines the successful movement.
Right, like a pigeon pecking a button.
Exactly. But with this specific corvid behavior, researchers observe something fundamentally different. The crow does not engage in hundreds of accidental random bending motions.
It just does it.
It looks at the tube, recognizes that a straight tool failed, and then deliberately seeks out a crevice to create a shape it has never created before. It is the spontaneous generation of a solution on the very first or second attempt.
Oh, wow.
Neurologically, the bird has to construct a mental representation of the hook before the hook physically exists in the real world.
It sees it in its mind's eye first.
Yes. It's comparing the shape of the problem to a hypothetical tool in its mind. That forward planning completely breaks the rules of simple, reward-based conditioning.
That fundamentally dismantles the idea of an animal just reacting blindly to stimuli. It is almost exactly like a human standing in front of a malfunctioning vending machine.
That's a great analogy, actually.
Right. You put your coin in, and the item gets stuck against the glass. You do not just immediately walk away and forget about it. You try pushing the button again.
We might shake the machine slightly.
Exactly. You give it a shove. Then you actively devise a new strategy. Perhaps buying a heavier item positioned directly above it to knock the first one down.
Yes.
You are assessing failure, consulting your understanding of gravity, and improvising a solution.
Precisely.
But if a bird is capable of that exact same improvisational logic, that deliberate strategy, why have humans historically been so profoundly resistant to acknowledging this kind of intelligence in the natural world? I mean, why did we need to believe they were just running on autopilot?
The resistance comes down to a deeply ingrained historical and psychological comfort. Acknowledging that animals possess reason has always been incredibly inconvenient for humanity.
Inconvenient how?
Well, for thousands of years, we built our entire worldview, our social hierarchies, and our economic systems on the bedrock assumption that human beings were fundamentally isolated in their capacity for rational thought.
We needed to be special.
We demanded it. If you look back, the greatest philosophical minds reinforced this divide meticulously. Aristotle, who is foundational to Western thought, definitively asserted that animals lacked reason entirely.
Right.
He proposed a hierarchy of souls, suggesting animals possess memory and sensation, but no rational intellect. And centuries later, Thomas Aquinas cemented this into theological doctrine.
Ah, so it became a religious imperative too.
Exactly. He decreed that animals possess no immortal souls, which further separated them from human moral consideration.
So it was a slow buildup of denial.
Yes, but it was in the 17th century that René Descartes formalized this prejudice into a prevailing scientific doctrine.
What did Descartes argue?
He argued that animals were quite literally sophisticated biological machines, flesh and blood automatons. He called them the bet machine, the beast machine.
A beast machine. That is a very specific, cold term.
Very cold. Descartes believed that because animals did not use human language, they did not have thoughts. If a dog cried out in pain, Descartes argued it was merely the mechanical grinding of internal gears.
Wait, really?
Yes. He said it was a purely physical reflex, absolutely no different to the squeak of an unoiled wheel or a clock striking the hour.
That is a very grim, incredibly utilitarian way of viewing the living world. To look at a creature in pain and convince yourself it is just a mechanical alarm going off.
It requires a massive suspension of empathy.
It does. It feels like it requires active effort to ignore the reality of a suffering animal. What was the purpose of establishing such a harsh philosophy?
Well, as I said, it was incredibly useful. It insulated humans from immense moral discomfort. By stripping the natural world of reason and conscious thought, humanity made itself feel uniquely elevated.
Placed at the absolute center of the universe.
Exactly. But more importantly, it neatly justified our most brutal practices. If an animal was just a machine devoid of reasoning, then consuming them, treating them as property, testing upon them, and exploiting their labor required no ethical reckoning whatsoever.
Because you do not mourn a broken tractor.
Precisely. You don't feel guilt for a machine. Furthermore, this logic of human exceptionalism was frequently twisted to justify institutionalized human slavery.
Oh, I see where this is going.
By suggesting that certain groups of humans possess less reason than others, placing them closer to animals on this fabricated hierarchy, their suffering could be dismissed as irrelevant. The denial of animal minds was a protective wall we built around our own conscience to allow society to function exactly the way we wanted it to.
So we essentially blinded ourselves to the intelligence around us because seeing it would demand that we fundamentally change how we behave. It was a willed ignorance, passed down through centuries of philosophy.
It was structurally necessary for society at the time.
But clearly, that wall eventually began to crack. How was such a deeply ingrained, structurally necessary prejudice finally broken? Did scientists just wake up one morning, abandon centuries of dogma, and decide to actually observe the creatures they were studying?
No, it was certainly not a sudden awakening. It was a slow, highly resistant collision with undeniable evidence. The academic shockwave that truly began to fracture that wall occurred in the mid-20th century.
Okay, when exactly?
Specifically in the 1950s, through the work of a psychologist named Wolfgang Köhler.
What did Köhler do?
Köhler designed an experiment that directly challenged the assumptions of Descartes and Aristotle. He placed a monkey, a chimpanzee, in an entirely empty room.
Right.
Hanging from the ceiling, completely out of the chimpanzee's physical reach, was a bunch of bananas. And scattered on the floor of the room were two simple wooden boxes.
Just boxes and bananas.
Yes. Now, based on the prevailing scientific dogma of the time, researchers thought they knew exactly what to expect.
Because they assumed the animal lacked reason.
Exactly. They thought the animal, capable only of operant conditioning, would jump blindly at the bananas. It would experience frustration. It would shriek, perhaps throw the boxes around in an emotional outburst, and eventually just give up.
Solving a multi-step problem without training was thought to be biologically impossible.
Correct. But instead, the chimpanzee sat and observed. It looked at the bananas. It looked at the boxes. It calculated the distance.
It was taking in the variable.
Yes. Then it calmly walked over to one of the boxes, dragged it directly underneath the hanging fruit, and climbed on top.
Okay.
It reached up, but quickly realized the height was still insufficient.
So what did it do? Did it get frustrated then?
No, it did not panic or revert to blind frustration. It climbed down, walked to the second box, dragged it over, and carefully stacked it on top of the first, ensuring it was stable. It then climbed this newly constructed tower and retrieved the bananas.
I want to pause there and really unpack why this was so monumental. To a layperson listening today, stacking boxes might just seem like a neat trick. But neurologically, what is happening in the chimpanzee's mind that shatters the old paradigm?
Neurologically, the chimpanzee is engaging in advanced spatial reasoning and sequential planning.
Sequential planning.
Yes. It requires the animal to hold a goal in its mind, reaching the bananas, and then work backwards to figure out the steps required to achieve it.
Oh, working backwards from the goal.
Precisely. It must understand the physical properties of the boxes, recognizing them not just as objects in the environment, but as potential tools that can alter elevation.
And it had never been trained to do this?
Crucially, no. The chimpanzee had no prior training in this specific task. It had no instruction. It had never seen boxes used as climbing apparatus by humans or other apes.
So it solved it entirely in its head first.
It demonstrated observation, spatial planning, and the execution of a multi-step strategy entirely in its own mind before taking physical action.
How did the scientific community react to that?
They were deeply unsettled. They were so threatened by this undeniable display of logic that they immediately began moving the goalposts.
Of course they did.
Desperate to maintain human exceptionalism, scientists labeled the behavior trial and error, or luck, or merely an advanced form of instinct.
They called stacking two boxes stable luck.
They argued the chimpanzee was just playing with boxes and accidentally found itself closer to the bananas. The alternative, that the animal had reasoned its way to a solution, was simply too uncomfortable to accept because of the philosophical history we just discussed.
It is deeply ironic when you look at that scenario. The researchers themselves were the ones suffering from profound cognitive dissonance.
Absolutely.
They were the ones behaving irrationally, desperately trying to contort the facts to fit their preconceived worldview, while the chimpanzee in the room was demonstrating pure, unclouded logic.
The animal just wanted the food and solved the puzzle.
Exactly. The animal solved it, and the humans spent years trying to invent complex, illogical reasons why the puzzle had not actually been solved.
It's a perfect summary of mid-century cognitive science.
But physical physics is one thing. You can see a box, you can touch a banana. Gravity and space are tangible.
Yes.
Abstract thought, however like language, concepts, and communication, is invisible. If they finally accepted physical problem solving, how did they even begin to test an animal for something you cannot see? Did stacking boxes eventually pave the way for testing the abstract?
It absolutely did.
Yeah.
Once it was established that animals could manipulate their physical environment through internal reasoning, the natural progression for science was to test whether they could manipulate abstract concepts.
And how did they do that?
This led directly to the ultimate test of cognitive ability, the attempt to bridge the communication gap between species. In the 1960s, researchers Beatrice and Alan Gardner initiated a groundbreaking project with a young chimpanzee named Washoe.
Oh, I've heard of Washoe.
Most people have, but the context is key.
Yeah.
Now, prior attempts to teach apes language had failed miserably, primarily because humans arrogantly tried to force chimpanzees to vocalize human sounds.
To literally speak English.
Yes, but a chimpanzee's vocal tract and larynx are anatomically incapable of producing human speech. They were failing a test they did not have the physical hardware to take.
That's incredibly unfair.
It is. The Gardners recognized this and decided to teach Washoe American Sign Language. They did this without coercion or punishment, relying purely on patient daily interaction, much like how one speaks to a human toddler.
And what were the results?
The results were staggering. Within a few years, Washoe mastered over 350 individual signs.
Okay, but let me challenge that. Memorizing hand gestures for a reward is still just advanced mimicry, is it not? A dog can learn a physical command to roll over for a treat. How do we know Washoe was actually using language abstractly rather than just performing a physical trick to get an apple?
That is the crucial distinction. The turning point for abstract reasoning occurred when Washoe encountered a swan upon a pond.
A swan!
Yes, she had never seen a swan before in her life, and she'd never been taught the specific sign for it. She was not prompted by a researcher holding a treat.
So what did she do?
Instead of remaining silent or signing, "I do not know," Washoe looked at the creature, processed its visual characteristics, and seamlessly combined two separate signs she already knew: water and bird.
Water bird.
Yes. She created a novel compound word to describe something entirely new. This is a definitive leap from simple mimicry to creative, abstract language use. She understood that symbols could be combined to create new meaning.
That's beautiful. It's poetry, essentially.
It is. Furthermore, Washoe eventually adopted a son, a young chimpanzee named Lulis, and Lulis eventually learned around 50 distinct signs.
From the researchers.
No, this is a critical mechanism. Lulis was never taught by the human researchers. The humans intentionally stopped signing when Lulis was present. Lulis learned the signs entirely through cultural transmission.
By watching Washoe.
By watching Washoe and other signing chimpanzees communicate with one another, Washoe would actually physically mold Lulis's hands into the correct shapes to teach him. This perfectly mirrors how human children learn language from their parents.
That is fascinating. Cultural transmission means the knowledge exists independently of humans. The chimpanzees own the language.
They absolutely did.
But I understand this capacity for abstract communication was not limited to our closest primate relatives. There was also remarkable research done with birds, specifically an African gray parrot. Can you walk me through that?
Yes, the research involving an African gray
Say the
parrot
color.
named Alex, conducted
Red
by
hue.
Dr. Irene Pepperberg, completely shattered the notion that
Blue
abstract
sphere.
thought required a primate brain.
What could Alex do?
Alex possessed a vocabulary that allowed him to identify shapes, colors, and materials. If you handed him a green wooden triangle, he could verbally identify the color, the material, and the shape.
He could tell you it was wood.
Yes. He could count objects aloud. He clearly understood complex abstract concepts like same and different, or bigger and smaller.
That's remarkable for a bird.
It is. But perhaps the most profound indicator of Alex's internal abstract reasoning was not his correct answers, but his reaction to the testing itself.
What do you mean?
When Alex grew bored or fatigued with a repetitive task, He would not just stare blankly or revert to random noises. He would visibly refuse to participate.
He would refuse.
He would turn his head away, verbally tell the researchers no, or deliberately give wrong answers just to end the session. If the researcher asked him the color of a red block 5 times in a row, Alex would intentionally say green just to disrupt the experiment.
I want to pause right there because that detail about Alex expressing boredom is incredibly striking. Boredom is not a biological survival mechanism.
No, it isn't.
It is not an instinct. Boredom is a deeply relatable conscious state. It implies an internal life, a mind that expects stimulation, a mind that possesses an ego.
Yes, an ego is exactly the right word.
And a mind that feels entirely justified in deciding it has had enough of human nonsense for one day. It paints a picture of intelligence that is so much broader than we normally assume.
It certainly does.
But if a parrot, a chimpanzee, and a dog all possess reasoning, they clearly experience the world in vastly different ways. How do modern scientists even begin to categorize this vast, chaotic spectrum of intelligence across so many radically different species?
Categorizing this intelligence requires us to completely abandon the idea of a single, universal scale of smartness with humans at the absolute top.
Right. No more ladders.
Exactly. Modern researchers have realized that an animal's intelligence is deeply tied to its evolutionary needs. However, when we look at reasoning abilities, we can generally group these animals into tiers based on how closely their problem-solving resembles our own familiar processes.
Okay, so who is in Tier 1?
Tier 1 consists of the obvious geniuses of the animal kingdom. This includes our closest evolutionary relatives, chimpanzees, bonobos, orangutans, and gorillas, who share roughly 98 to 99% of human DNA.
Makes sense.
Their intelligence manifests in highly familiar ways: complex tool use, long-term memory, holding grudges, and forming intricate political hierarchies.
Hmm?
But their most remarkable cognitive trait is a capability called metacognition.
Metacognition.
Yes, metacognition is quite literally the ability to think about your own thinking.
Thinking about thinking. For anyone listening, let us make that concrete. It is exactly like a student sitting in a university exam hall.
Right.
You look at a complex mathematics question, you read it twice, you actively consult your own memory, and you consciously decide, I do not know this well enough. I will skip it and return to it later.
That's a perfect description.
It requires you to step outside of yourself and observe your own mind. How on earth do you prove that a primate is doing that?
You prove it by giving them the option to opt out. Research demonstrates that when primates are presented with difficult cognitive tests on a touchscreen, they pause for noticeably longer periods than when faced with easy tasks.
They are hesitating.
They weigh the evidence. If the test provides a skip button that offers a very small guaranteed reward, rather than risking a wrong answer and getting nothing, they will use it.
Oh, wow.
If they are entirely unsure of the answer, they choose the option that allows them to pass. They are consciously evaluating their own internal state of certainty. They know what they do not know.
That is incredibly advanced.
It is. But this top tier of obvious geniuses is not exclusively primates. It includes cetaceans, like dolphins and orcas.
Because of their social structures.
Partly, but also their sensory processing. Dolphins navigate their dark underwater environments using echolocation. To understand the intelligence required for this, you have to understand the mechanics.
How does it work?
A dolphin emits high-frequency clicks, the sound waves bounce off objects, and the returning echoes are received through the dolphin's lower jaw, which channels the sound to their inner ear.
Through their jaw.
Yes. The dolphin's auditory cortex then processes these microsecond delays to construct a high-resolution, three-dimensional acoustic image of their environment. The continuous neurological processing power required to map a moving ocean in real time is staggering.
It's like having a supercomputer running continuously just to see.
Exactly. And because of this processing power, they are highly capable problem solvers. During one instance, when the United States Navy trained dolphins to detect underwater mines, the dolphins actively invented their own shortcuts to accomplish the task faster.
Shortcuts the trainers didn't teach them.
Shortcuts the Navy trainers had never anticipated or taught them, subverting the rules of the training entirely.
That's brilliant. Are there any land mammals besides apes in this tier?
Yes. Asian elephants also firmly occupy this tier. They possess a massive cerebral cortex, allowing for deep social memories and complex problem solving.
I've heard they have incredible memories.
They do. In one notable example, an elephant named Kandula at the National Zoo in Washington was attempting to reach fruit suspended high above his enclosure.
Similar to the chimpanzee experiment.
Precisely. And without any prompting or human assistance, Köhler scanned his environment, located a large, heavy plastic block, rolled it directly beneath the fruit, and stood on it with his front legs to reach his prize.
He stacked the box.
A century after Köhler's chimpanzee shocked the world by stacking boxes, an elephant independently executed the exact same spatial reasoning, but adapted for a multi-ton body.
That is a beautiful full circle moment in the research, but I noticed something about these tier 1 animals. The apes, the dolphins, the elephants, they are all large mammals. They're highly social, and in many ways, we can easily map our own human behaviors onto theirs. It feels safe. What happens when we look beyond this group? What about the animals that look absolutely nothing like us, the ones whose intelligence feels entirely alien?
This is where the research becomes truly extraordinary, because we enter the realm of the unlikely geniuses. Animals in Tier 2 and Tier 3 whose minds are entirely alien to ours, structurally different, yet fiercely intelligent.
Give me an example.
Take the New Caledonian crow. These birds do not just use tools, they plan for a hypothetical future.
A hypothetical future.
Yes. In experiments, they have been presented with puzzles they could not currently solve because they lacked the correct tool. The puzzle is then taken away.
Oh.
The next day, the crows are offered a selection of tools, including the one they needed the previous day. They remember the unsolved puzzle, select the correct tool, and hold on to it, anticipating that they will face the same problem again later.
That is abstract forward planning.
It is. Then there are octopuses, which represent a completely divergent evolutionary path for intelligence on this planet. They possess a decentralized nervous system.
Decentralized, meaning it's not all in their head.
Exactly. They have 8 arms, and each arm contains its own semi-independent cluster of neurons acting almost like a secondary brain. They routinely figure out how to unscrew the lids of jars from the inside.
I've seen videos of that. It's terrifyingly clever.
It is. But perhaps most staggeringly, recent biological research has revealed that octopuses can physically edit their own RNA in real time to adapt to changing ocean temperatures.
Wait, stop right there. Editing their own RNA. That sounds like pure science fiction.
It does, but it's entirely real.
How does that actually work mechanically? Most of us understand DNA as a blueprint, but how is an animal editing its own biology on the fly?
It is an incredible mechanism. Think of DNA as the master blueprint locked safely inside the nucleus of a cell. When the body needs to build a protein, it does not use the original blueprint.
It makes a copy.
Yes, it makes a temporary photocopy called messenger RNA, or mRNA, and sends that photocopy out to the cell's factory. In almost all animals, including humans, that photocopy is faithfully translated exactly as written.
Right.
But octopuses have the ability to intercept that mRNA photocopy and rewrite the instructions before the protein is built.
They rewrite the instructions themselves.
Yes. When the ocean water suddenly drops in temperature, a normal nervous system would become sluggish and fail. The octopus, however, edits its RNA to produce a different type of nerve protein, instantly retuning its nervous system to remain highly functional in the cold.
That is immediate adaptation.
This is not slow generational evolution over thousands of years. This is immediate individual adaptation driven by the creature's own physiological processing.
That is astounding. It completely upends our understanding of biology, but it also raises a massive question about the hardware of intelligence.
How so?
Well, we have always assumed that to be highly intelligent, you need a massive brain. Humans have huge brains, so we decided that was the benchmark. If a bird or an octopus is this smart, what does that mean for the relationship between brain size and intelligence?
It exposes brain size as one of the most persistent myths in cognitive science. Humans possess roughly 86 billion neurons in a relatively large brain. But let us look at a honeybee. A honeybee has a brain roughly the size of a single sesame seed, containing only about 960,000 neurons. Yet, bees navigate incredibly complex, shifting three-dimensional environments.
They communicate through dances, right?
Yes, they communicate floral locations to their hive through intricate geometry in their waggle dances. They demonstrate varied personalities, with some bees showing bold exploratory behavior while others are highly cautious.
With a brain the size of a sesame seed.
Exactly. Similarly, corvids, birds like crows and ravens, have brains scarcely larger than a walnut. Yet in comparative cognitive tests involving multi-step planning and tool use, these walnut-sized brains routinely outperform large primates.
They beat the primates.
Easily. A human researcher can barely explain the rules of a complex puzzle before a raven has already solved it.
So size really doesn't matter.
The scientific reality is that absolute brain size matters infinitely less than brain structure and neural density. Mammalian brains are structured with a neocortex, which is layered. Avian brains, however, have a structure called the pallium, which is organized in clusters or nuclei.
And that makes a difference.
A huge difference. The neurons in a bird's brain are much smaller and packed far more densely. Think of the human brain like a massive, sprawling corporate headquarters.
Okay.
There was lots of space, lots of corridors, and a lot of middle management. The corvid's brain is like a highly optimized tech startup working out of a garage.
Ah, I love that.
There is no middle management. There is no wasted space.
Yeah.
Every single neuron is pulling triple duty. It is not about the square footage. It is about how efficiently the space is used.
Yeah.
A crow's brain is a highly dense, hyper-efficient processor optimized specifically for crow problems.
That startup versus corporate headquarters analogy is brilliant. It perfectly highlights human arrogance, does it not?
It certainly does.
We tied the definition of intelligence to brain size for the simple, self-serving reason that we happen to have large brains. We measured everything against ourselves.
We made ourselves the gold standard.
But a bee does not need a human brain to solve a bee's problems. It just needs a perfectly designed sesame seed-sized supercomputer.
Precisely.
So if we accept that these very differently structured minds are capable of immense processing, I want to understand the actual mechanics of it. Walk me through the literal step-by-step process. When an animal mind encounters a completely new challenge, how does it actually tackle it in real time?
While the neural architecture varies wildly from a dolphin to a crow, scientists have observed a very distinct four-step mechanical process that occurs when an animal mind engages in active reasoning.
What is step one?
Step one is observation. When an animal encounters a novel problem, say a crow finding a hard plastic bottle with a desirable insect trapped inside, it does not simply react, it pauses.
It takes it in.
It approaches the bottle from different angles. It taps the plastic to test the material's density and acoustic resonance. It is actively gathering data and assessing variables it has never encountered before.
And step two?
Step two is hypothesis formation. Functionally, the animal begins to generate possible solutions. While this may not be the deliberate spoken internal monologue a human experiences, the brain is rapidly combining past experiences, environmental awareness, and spatial logic to formulate a plan.
So it's simulating the future.
Yes, it is running a simulation, predicting what might happen if it takes a certain action. Step three is execution, coupled closely with adjustment. The animal attempts its hypothesis.
So it tests the theory.
Exactly. Perhaps the crow tries to tip the bottle over. If the bottle is too heavy and the attempt fails, the animal registers the failure. This is critical. A reasoning animal remembers the failed attempt and does not repeat it.
It doesn't just bang its head against the wall.
No. It incorporates the new data, adjusts its hypothesis, and executes a new strategy, perhaps dropping stones into the bottle to raise the water level and bring the insect within reach.
That is incredible. And what is the final step?
Step four is the most advanced, and that is teaching. This goes beyond simple demonstration. It involves generational knowledge transfer.
Give me an example of that.
Orca mothers, for example, do not just hunt in front of their calves. They actively guide them, slowing down their own hunting process, exaggerating their movements, to teach pod-specific strategies for isolating prey.
They are holding a master class.
They are. Elephants physically guide younger members of the herd to hidden water sources during severe droughts, ensuring the geographical knowledge of the landscape survives the generation.
That is a highly sophisticated, almost scientific method they are employing. Observation, hypothesis, testing, and peer review via teaching. Are there recent breakthroughs that show just how deep this cognitive process goes?
Yes, and these contemporary studies continually add incredible nuance to these mechanics. For example, recent research has confirmed that dolphins possess theory of mind.
I want to make sure we define that clearly. In human psychology, theory of mind is a major developmental milestone for children.
Yes, usually around age 4 or 5.
It is the moment they realize that other people have different thoughts, secrets, and perspectives from their own. How do you actually test if a dolphin has theory of mind in the water?
You test it by monitoring how they share information. It is the profound cognitive leap of recognizing that other beings have their own separate minds, with entirely different sets of knowledge.
How does the experiment work?
If a dolphin watches a second dolphin being fed by a trainer, and then the second dolphin is temporarily removed from the area, the first dolphin understands that a newly introduced third dolphin has absolutely no knowledge of where the food is.
Because the third dolphin wasn't there.
Exactly. The first dolphin will actively change its communication style to guide the ignorant dolphin. It understands the concept of another individual's ignorance.
That implies such a deep level of empathy. Are there other breakthroughs like this?
Yes, similarly, researchers at facilities like the Ueno Zoo have documented elephants demonstrating literal arithmetic.
Elephants doing math.
Yes. When presented with two hidden buckets containing different amounts of fruit, the elephants were able to keep a running mental count as fruit was sequentially added or removed from each bucket.
So they couldn't see the total, they just tracked the additions and subtraction.
Correct. They correctly selected the bucket with the greater quantity over 70% of the time, even when the final numbers were too large to simply guess by sight. They are holding abstract values in their working memory and manipulating them.
That is staggering.
And perhaps most urgently, we are witnessing orcas evolving entirely new complex behaviors in real time. Specific pods have developed strategies of intentionally beaching themselves to catch seals off the shoreline.
Which is incredibly dangerous for a whale.
A highly dangerous, calculated risk that must be taught. More recently, specific orca populations off the Iberian coast have been observed coordinating with one another to systematically target and damage the rudders of boats.
Wait, I have to stop you there. When you say the orcas are coordinating to damage boat rudders, a skeptic might argue that one orca just did it by accident, liked the feeling of the water pressure, and the others are just mindlessly copying the physical action without any shared intent. How do scientists distinguish between mindless mimicry and actual shared tactical intent?
Because of the tactical adjustment observed during the encounters, the orcas do not just blindly ram the boat, they take turns.
They coordinate.
One will distract while another targets the specific mechanism of the rudder. If the boat changes speed or direction, the orcas adjust their formation to maintain their tactical advantage.
That requires real-time communication.
Immense real-time communication, shared intent, and the rapid transmission of a new, complex behavior across a social group. It isn't an accident, it's a coordinated operation.
It is profoundly moving when you truly consider what that means. To know that a dolphin looks at another dolphin and understands, I know something that you do not know. Or that an orca can communicate a tactical plan.
It changes everything.
It does. That requires a level of empathy and understanding of self versus other that we have fiercely guarded as a uniquely human trait. It completely reframes how we look at them, and it gently steers us toward a very uncomfortable reality.
Yes.
If these creatures are this aware, if they observe, hypothesize, teach, and understand the ignorance or knowledge of others, what does that mean for how humans interact with them? We have built our entire society on the assumption of their ignorance.
It demands a complete moral reckoning. The ethical reality of acknowledging animal reasoning is severe, because if an animal can reason, it can understand its own circumstances.
And if it understands.
If it understands its circumstances, the nature of its suffering changes entirely. When you look at captive environments, this becomes undeniably clear. Scientists and veterinarians frequently observe profound behavioral depression in captive dolphins and chimpanzees.
Because they know they were trapped.
Exactly. A dolphin in a sterile concrete tank or a chimpanzee in a small enclosure does not merely experience physical limitation, it experiences the psychological torment of understanding its confinement.
Which is so much worse.
Similarly, researchers note that octopuses kept in sterile laboratory tanks without complex puzzles or cognitive enrichment do not just become inactive, they literally waste away.
From boredom?
They suffer severe physical decline, sometimes even self-mutilation, driven entirely by mental understimulation. This completely alters how we must view the global conservation crisis.
Because we aren't just losing DNA.
Exactly. When we discuss protecting endangered species, the conversation is usually framed around preserving genetic diversity or maintaining a balanced food web.
Yeah.
But acknowledging animal reasoning means recognizing that we are protecting the only reasoning beings within a specific ecological niche.
That's a powerful way to frame it.
When humans clear-cut an ancient forest or destroy an elephant habitat, we are not just displacing biological organisms. We are burning down a library.
A library of their knowledge.
We are destroying decades of accumulated, generationally transmitted geographical wisdom, social structures, and cultural knowledge that those elephants possessed. The loss is cognitive, not just biological.
That is a deeply heavy, but incredibly important realization. The idea that an animal understanding its own confinement elevates its suffering from something purely physical to something intensely psychological. It forces you to look at a zoo or a marine park or even a deforested landscape with entirely new eyes. It makes you question every interaction.
It really does.
But surely there are still distinctions. As remarkable as they are not building cities or launching satellites. What are the limits?
It is vital to maintain scientific objectivity and acknowledge that there are unbridgeable gaps. Animals do not build cumulative culture in the way humans do.
Meaning they don't stack knowledge over centuries.
Precisely. While an orcapod passes down hunting techniques, they do not invent tools, write the instructions down, and allow a generation a century later to build upon that technology to create something entirely new.
Right. What about language?
Despite decades of rigorous attempts, no animal has mastered true symbolic language with complex syntax and grammar. They can use words, as Washoe did, but they do not structure sentences with past and future tenses to tell complex stories.
And philosophically.
Animals do not appear to engage in abstract philosophical reasoning about their own mortality, or ponder the origins of the cosmos.
Well, there is a boundary.
Yes. But these limitations do not negate their intelligence, they simply clarify it. Human reasoning differs in degree, particularly in our capacity for abstract symbolism and long-term cross-domain planning. But the fundamental architecture of reasoning, the ability to assess a novel problem and think your way through it, is shared. The gap between humanity and the rest of the natural world is infinitely smaller than we ever wanted to admit.
Processing those limitations actually helps. It does not feel like a demotion of animal intelligence at all. Rather, it acts as a clarification of human uniqueness, standing right alongside, but not entirely above, animal genius. It makes the world feel infinitely more crowded with thought.
It does. And if there is one overarching philosophical insight to take away from all of this, it is how thoroughly our own ego clouded our vision.
We couldn't see past ourselves.
For centuries, we demanded that animals prove their intelligence to us on strictly human terms. We expected them to speak with human vocal cords, to build with human hands, to solve puzzles designed by human minds. Because they could not do these specific things, we dismissed them as machines.
Like grading a fish on its ability to climb a tree.
Exactly. We were constantly looking for reflections of ourselves in the water, and in doing so, we remained entirely blind to the quiet, brilliant, and deeply alien reasoning happening in the natural world every single day. True wisdom, I think, does not come from finding animals that act like humans. It comes from recognizing and respecting intelligence in forms that are entirely alien to our own.
It has been a remarkable journey just talking through this today. We started by looking at a solitary, quiet crow sitting on a garden fence, and we have ended up navigating the vast, complex minds of elephants, the real-time genetic brilliance of octopuses, and entire oceans filled with thinking, calculating beings. It changes the texture of the world around you.
It really does.
And it leaves us with a lingering, provocative thought. As we stand on the precipice of creating artificial intelligence, pouring billions into teaching machines to think, we must ask ourselves a difficult question. If we spent centuries failing to recognize the brilliant alien minds of the natural world simply because they did not think exactly like us, are we destined to make the exact same mistake with the minds we build? Will we even recognize a new consciousness if it does not look like our own? The next time you are standing at your window or sitting across from your pet and you lock eyes with an animal, I invite you to take a breath and really look at them. Let go of the illusion of the biological machine. Allow yourself to wonder, just for a moment, what quiet, intricate calculations are happening behind their gaze. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. There is so much more of this fascinating world to uncover, and another deeply thoughtful discussion awaits us next time. Take care.